We easily pulled off handy boat stock and headed for our first destination, the Goslings. The Goslings are an archipelago comprised of 3 small islands, which, at low tide, offer beautiful sandy beaches with 2 of the islands connected by a spit of sand at low tide. The islands are managed by the Maine Heritage Trust, and there are several campsites that are free to use first come, first serve. On the weekends, the Goslings are very popular. Being a glorious Sunday, today was no exception. I dropped our sails, and rounding the corner into the anchorage, we were greeted by no less than 60 boats of all shapes, sizes, and types, along with a small army of people, each claiming their 2 square feet of beach space. We motored through the mass of boats and picked up an empty mooring that had a sizable pendant on the outer edge of the field, behind a large catamaran. As evening approached, the boats scattered, and by dinner time, only a handful of boats were left to spend the night, including a wooden schooner and a very expensive oyster yacht. The most surprising sight and sound were the 100+ seals that beached themselves on a nearby rock. Their fat bellies reminded us of our kitties. While not as loud as the sea lions at the Boston Aquarium, the chorus of barking was audible, but subsided as night fell. Today, we were super lazy and only set to Genoa for a deep, broad reach past Whaleback Island and into the harbor entrance. Once there, the wind was on our nose, and I decided Jessie needed a workout and put her on winch grinding duty. With the tide also against us, we must have tacked at least 10 times to cover the 0.8 of a mile into the marina. Today, July 29th, is my birthday, and I've been given the best birthday present ever. Jessie is on the boat, and she has a special dinner planned. Jessie is using every pot, pan, and inch of counter space in the galley to cook my special birthday dinner. It's seafood cioppino with mashed potatoes. Following dinner, the fog rolled in, a light rain started falling, and a serious food coma overtook us. What is that noise? Where is it coming from? And as you know, strange new noises on a boat always cause concern. My interest peaked. I poked my head out of the warm, dry cabin into the morning mist, and to my surprise, it was the launch driver coming by with fresh blueberry muffins and hot coffee, all compliments of the marina. As it turns out, the new owners of Dolphin Marina are working hard to attract transient boaters, and this is one of the many amenities they now provide. Other notable perks include the use of kayaks, bicycles, an outdoor fitness center, showers, and free laundry. After second breakfast and a pre-lunch snack, the rain finally abated and we set off for the Basin. The first part of the trip involved motoring through several shoals before reaching open water, where we turned east and set our sails. Winds were light, and the seas were a mix of moderate-sized rollers coming from offshore and waves reflecting off the nearby islands and shoals. Oddly, all the shoals have names, and the one which caught my eye was Bold Dick. The waves crashing upon its rocky promontory were truly impressive. We reached our waypoint and headed north into calmer waters and eventually up into the Meadows River, then down a skinny tributary through which opens the Basin. The Basin is about a mile wide and surrounded by trees with only a few houses on the western shore. 2,000 acres of the eastern shore was donated and preserved as a wildlife habitat. The Basin has a remote and wild feeling. Eagles, hawks, ospreys, terns, and seagulls swooped overhead, occasionally perching atop a sailboat's mast. A family of harbor seals popped their heads up to see what all the fuss was about, then gracefully returned to their underwater habitat. No trip is complete without a dinghy ride, and there's no better way to start the day than a scenic ride around the Basin. We spent the better part of an hour poking into every nook, cranny, peering into the trees to spot nesting eagles, and chatted with the local fishermen harvesting quahogs. We started off with 2 reefs in the main and a full Genoa. Winds were steady as we tacked up the new river and then picked up as we transitioned into Casco Bay. As forecast, it was gusty, and after a few decent puffs, one of which sent dishes flying across the galley, we shortened the Genoa to 100%. The boat was really happy, as was Jessie, with this new configuration. She sailed perfectly balanced, heading 35 degrees off the wind without autopilot or my hand on the wheel. Today is the most important day of the year. Why? Well, it's Jessie's birthday. The day started with fresh-baked jumbo cinnamon buns and coffee, followed by a stroll through the resort and one last dip in the infinity pool. A short motor out of the harbor and the sails were raised, and our destination today is Seguin Island. Seguin Island is Maine's most imposing lighthouse. The island's sheer cliffs rise 100 feet straight out of the water, and perched atop her is Maine's second oldest lighthouse, for which President George Washington signed the deed for the island. The Coast Guard manned the lighthouse for almost 200 years, but in 1985 they automated the light. The Friends of Seguin Light were formed and are now the caretakers of the island and the buildings. A few minutes into our sail, I heard Breakaway hailing Grayling on the radio. Strange, I thought. Who would be in radio contact with me that would have any reason for calling? We switched from channel 16 to 72, and the caller identified himself as Len, the former Commodore of the Blue Water Sailing Club. This is the same sailing club that I am a member of and will be traveling to Nova Scotia with. Since Seguin was full, he decided to head over to Love Cove and invited us to join him. We followed Len into the narrow entrance to Love Cove and were delighted by what we saw. Open to the north, but completely surrounded by land, islands and shoals offered it protection in all other directions, with only a few houses dotting the shoreline. Len was right. This was a quintessential harbor. To top it off, there are 2 mooring balls, which an anonymous owner maintains and allows people to use as long as they leave a note or a poem in the plastic bottle attached to the mooring pendant. You gotta love sailing in Maine. While we ate dinner, several large thunderstorms rolled through. In their wake, we were treated to a stunning cloudscape and sunset. As Len promised, we slept like a rock in the perfectly calm waters that evening. After a delicious breakfast and still fired up from her birthday, Jessie took the helm as we sailed on a close reach toward our destination of Damariscove. Before I had finished my second cup of coffee, Jessie indicated that we were approaching the harbor entrance. I scurried around, furling the Genoa, dropping the mainsail, and getting the anchor ready to drop. The harbor entrance is marked by the old Coast Guard life-saving station, which is now a private residence. The harbor itself is long and narrow, barely 100 feet wide at low tide. According to the guidebook, there is room for 3 sailboats to anchor. As it turned out, one was already there. We tucked in behind them and then threw out a stern anchor to ensure we didn't drift in the middle of the night. Once fed and hydrated, we set off to explore the several miles of maintained trails that crisscross the 1.7-mile-long island. There was a time, long ago, that trees grew here, but harvesting and the severe forest fire finished them off. Today, the island is covered in low brush, bursting with blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries. A freshwater pond, once used to harvest ice in the winter, is now a gigantic bird bath for hundreds of nesting birds. As tempting as it might be, they do not recommend swimming in it. Today, Damariscove is managed by the Boothbay Regional Land Trust. However, dating back into the 1600s, this was a major fishing port for the Europeans, and before that, for the First Nations people. In 1676, the First Indian War broke out and lasted on and off for 50 years. Coastal settlers fled to the outer islands of Damariscove and Monhegan seeking safety. Then, for the next 200 years, Damariscove remained a fishing community, but the Great Depression forced many residents to return to the mainland, reducing the island's year-round population to only 25. We slept soundly the remainder of the night and awoke to a baritone chorus of thunder just before daybreak. The storms rolled by while we ate breakfast, drank coffee, dry, warm, inside the cabin. Once past, we pulled up the anchors and motored to Boothbay. Entering the harbor, a pod of dolphins playfully swam in front of the boat. A small, ugly cruise ship was anchored mid-harbor, as were several large sailing boats, the prominent one, a gorgeous schooner called Eros, which is one of the Greek gods of love. After mooring the boat, we walked into town to mingle with the tourists and visited the local ice cream shop. After breakfast, our attention turned to cleaning up the boat and packing all the items that needed to go home. It's sad to see our trip come to a close, but in 2 short weeks, I'll be returning with my friends JD and Scooter, and we will set sail for Nova Scotia.